Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephanie Baer. My colleague, Stephanie Danker, who you've already gotten to hear from. We are both associate professors in art education here at Miami University, and we welcome you to the 41st lecture of the John and Betty Michael Autobiographical Lecture Series in Art Education.
God damn you.
Every year, our program hosts this series, bringing in an accomplished and influential person in the field of art education. It is a tremendous privilege and opportunity to engage our wider community of students, colleagues, and friends in this event, with its first year being online. We are so glad you've come to celebrate our honored guest and speaker this evening, Dr. Terry Barrett. A little information about our program tonight. In a moment, Dr. Danker will read Dr. Barrett's bio, but first I'd like to invite you to use the chat if you have questions for Terry and to tell us your name and where you're from, which you've already gotten an opportunity to do, so thank you. We also ask that you remain on mute throughout the presentation tonight so everybody can hear clearly. You are welcome to use the chat, but please understand we want to allow Terry as much time as possible tonight since we've lost a little bit of our timing in the meeting here. As part of the series, Dr. Barrett has written his autobiography to be part of our archives, and we will be posting that as well as a recording of tonight's talk on our archive site. The John A. and Betty J. Michael Autobiographical Lecture Series in Art Ed was initiated by Dr. John Michael. He's a former professor of art education here at Miami with a generous gift from he and his wife Betty in 1972 when Edwin Ziegfeld lectured here at Miami. One outstanding educator is invited each year to present their autobiographical lecture for the series, noting the influences which have shaped their philosophy about art education, teaching, and the arts. They also meet with our current student teachers to answer questions and share their inspiration and hope for the future of art education. We're currently working on digitizing the series and to increase its viability, its visibility, its use and influence on a broader scale. And once available, you'll be able to explore the lives and work of many notable educators, a few who are here tonight, thank you, including Mary Adeline McKibben, Victor D'Amico, Natalie Robinson Cole, June King McPhee, Charles Gateskill, Edmund Feldman, Laura Chapman, Eugene Grigsby, Elliot Eisner, John Michael, and so many more. And we are now pleased and honored to add Dr. Barrett to that esteemed list. With that, I'd like to hand it over back to Dr. Danker.
All right, thank you, Dr. Baer. So Terry Barrett is Professor Emeritus at the Ohio State University, where he received a Distinguished Teaching Award for his courses in art criticism and aesthetics. Dr. Barrett is author of books including Why Is That Art?, Criticizing Photographs, Criticizing Art, Interpreting Art, Talking About Student Art, and Making Art. His most recent book is Crits, a Student Manual. He is former senior editor of the research journals Studies in Art Education and the International Journal of Education and the Arts. He is a distinguished fellow of the National Art Education Association and recipient of the Insight Award from the Society of Photographic Education. His chapters and articles on teaching art, criticism, and aesthetics in schools, museums, and community settings are published in many anthologies and journals. He has worked in art with learners of all ages throughout the United States and internationally. He is currently writing and making art in Bradenton, Florida. So thank you so much for your patience, and we are very excited to hear from Dr. Barrett.
I want to thank both Stephanies for all the work they did to do this. I was born in 1945. This is a picture of the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium in 1945. It was the last onslaught, last major clash with the Germans. And my dad was in it, and he didn't know that I was born until like 4 months later when he got a telegram, son born, all well, safe, all my love. That was my mother. And he came home. That's me and him, dapper looking dude. This is my older sister. There's 5 of us siblings. I'm the second born. This is the oldest. And then I had two more sisters after that, and I was waiting for a brother. But the brother finally came, but by the time he came, I was about out of the house. So I grew up with sisters, and I tried to make them into boys, but that didn't work. And I tried to make them into guy playmates, and gender and age difference got in the way. Mom ran the household. We had a very small home, very meager. We were crowded. And I depended a lot on her because there were no playmates in our neighborhood. I grew up in a town outside of Chicago, Westmont, Illinois. But I have an early memory of Mom reading The Little Engine That Could. You might well know the story. The little engine is pulling an old train up the mountain, and the engine is very small, but he keeps trying. And he keeps saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And then he gets to the top, and whoosh, he's made it. He can roll back down, and he made it. So I went to a very Catholic school, elementary school, Holy Trinity. This is second grade Holy Communion. The school was, typically at that time, that was back like in 1952 or so. We had like 32 kids in a class, and this is two classes in one classroom, and those are our desks. That's how we were taught. And one thing, I was very socially uncomfortable. I still am, as you might be able to tell here, because I never had playmates, and I didn't have any kindergarten experience. Mom wanted me out of the house, out of her hair, and also because I didn't have playmates. So she sent me to school, but with no kindergarten before. And it was this Catholic school. We were all lined up wearing bow ties, and it was very frightening to me, but I survived it. I grew up, the place that I grew up was Illinois, and we still had prairies. And I learned to appreciate the subtleties of the Midwest, and I still do. This is a recent shot in Florida, but this is some of the kind of stuff that I'm viewing, that I'm making art with now. I joined a seminary at age 13. It was to study to become a priest, a Catholic priest. And it was called Mater Dolorosa Seminary, or Sorrowful Mother Seminary. And we had about 60 guys. They were actually a very happy 4 years for me. I was glad to get away from home. And I had a happy teenage. My teenage years were happier than my earlier years. And I didn't go through teenage angst. It was a good life for 4 years. And I was told then, I had a couple really influential people. One was an artist who came in to teach, and her name was Margaret Dagenet. And through her, I found I had a proclivity for art. And through a dear priest, Father O'Brien, he thought I could write well. So I held on to those two things, and I went with them. So after 4 years of high school, seminary year-round, we got to come home for Christmas vacation in summer, but that was really weird because I didn't have any friends again at home because all my friends were in the seminary and dispersed for the summer. So I became a camp counselor during the summers. And then I spent the next 3 years in monasteries. 2 of those years were in Northern Ireland. This is a picture, current picture. It still is this way. We used to play Irish football in that green cow pasture that you see in the foreground. And those were very happy years. This is a back view of the monastery as it is today. So I was there from 63 to 65. I was a librarian. This is a screen grab, but it's very reminiscent of the library we had in the monastery. And I spent my days like this. We wore black robes. These are Benedictines, I believe, and they wear white robes. But we chatted back and forth from morning, mid-afternoon. We did all the hours and chanted psalms in Latin about 5 times a day. And the rest of the time we took classes in philosophy and Greek and some math, but the philosophy was the best part. We had a good philosophy teacher. And I was really persuaded. Well, we went through, the history of philosophy from Plato and Aristotle on up through the Middle Ages, Aquinas, and then into modern times. And modern times at that time was existentialism. And that was very persuasive to me. And most of it was atheistic existentialism. So everything was questioned, and I was questioning everything, but still very much enjoying the communal living. It was very peaceful. I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Obedience wasn't a problem for a Catholic kid. That's how we were raised. Poverty was really liberating, that kind of poverty where I owned nothing. None of us had any personal property. It was all communal, but we didn't need anything. I mean, we were really well taken care of. So we were free of worldly possessions, so to speak, and so we can concentrate on higher aspirations. And that was, I'd go for that now if I could pick that up again. Chastity, that was more, it came with loneliness. So that was a challenge. So this is a fuzzy screen grab, but this is pretty much how we looked, and that looks like Ireland, and we would take walks. Talking about chastity for a minute, of course we couldn't get married, but almost equally as important, the monastery did not want us to have particular friendships, meaning we shouldn't get close to any one person. We should love everyone the same. Well, I needed more than that. So there was loneliness associated with that. I could live with it, but I worried about a lifetime of that. But so what happened was that after 2 years of Ireland, our class came back to the States, and my classmates in the monastery went to St. Louis University, which is a Catholic university, Jesuit. But 3 of us wanted to study art, so they put us into Webster College, which was an all-female situation. So after being cloistered for all these years, I was at Webster College. This has a story. This is an embarrassing story. I'll tell it. When I was back in the States after Ireland, I'd go to Webster College and hang out and make art and have a great time. Then go back for prayers, or go back, get dressed up in the black robes, have prayers, night prayers, and go back up to my room, undress, get into street clothes, and me and a buddy took me to Gaslight Square. At the time, it was all go-go joints. And this is a screen grab of a typical go-go joint. So I was there practicing poverty, chastity, and obedience, and going out drinking on a fake ID at the go-go bars, and then going back to the monastery, and then going back to Webster. And I really don't know why I did not have a nervous breakdown, because my faith was really changing. It was more an agnostic than anything. And I knew the life, I couldn't sustain it. I loved it, and I have no regrets about it. I learned a lot. I learned silence, for one thing, which I cherish, and a very orderly life, and I knew what I was doing. So, but then I left. And at the time at Webster, I was majoring in art, and Sister Carita Kent was a big influence because it was a Catholic college. This is a picture of Sister Carita Kent. She didn't teach us, but the nuns who did teach us, and lay people, this was sort of the spirit of the time in the arts, which I embraced. Rita Kent was against the war. She and Barrett resisted the war, and they were on the right side of all the issues. But anyway, I graduated, and the year I graduated, it was the Vietnam War, or the American War, as the Vietnamese call it, was raging, and I was going to be drafted because I was out of school, single, and I was opposed to the war. I did not want to go, but I didn't want to run up to Canada. I didn't want to claim that I was gay or insane. One of the nuns who taught me found me a job to teach, because they were not drafting teachers at that time. So I said yes. But the only job open to me was Sumner High School in St. Louis. This was 1967. I was there for 3 years. And it was, I grew up as a white kid in a white suburb, and then in a white monastery. And then I was thrown into this is the heart of the ghetto, and it was really hard times. This was the beginning of the Black Power movement. This is the recently deceased John Lewis. He was age 25. He was beaten on the march to Selma. He just died recently, as you know. This is my first full year of teaching there. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And there happened to be a parent-teacher association meeting that evening. And I'm just crushed and terrified, not terrified, just crushed by Martin Luther King being assassinated. It was just a horrible thing. So I went to the PTA meeting, and the principal ran the meeting, and Martin Luther King was never mentioned the whole time, the whole evening. And I think at the time, that part of the Black community was intimidated. They, I think, bought into the FBI, who were constantly accusing Martin Luther King of being a communist. And so there was just, it was just shocking all around. The whole experience of teaching there was shocking to me. I had never seen a Black billboard before until I drove to the school. I was so afraid of my job. I took the job in January with no student teaching, no art education courses, no interview, and I had never been to the school before. So there I am driving to the school, and I was so afraid that I thought, oh, I'm late. I think I'll stop and get a donut and coffee because I'm late anyway. Might as well try to calm down. So I stopped and got a cup of coffee, and then went in and I tried to find a parking space on the street. I went up the main entrance and entered the building, and there was this tall Black man there who asked me who I was and what I was doing there. I told him I was a new art teacher. And he said, well, I just introduced you in the assembly. So, and he let it go at that. And he took me up to the classroom, and there I was teaching. And the second day, I came late also for the same reason. I was just scared. I was a scared kid. I was like, I don't know, 19, 20. And at Webster, I had a couple of good Black friends who had gone to Sumner High School. And when I told them I took a job there, they just guffawed. They said, no way. They said they wouldn't teach there. I said, no, I am. And I felt good about it, noble about it, because I really believe in the civil rights movement, and I thought maybe I could do a little bit somehow, some way to advance civil rights. So I went ahead and did it. And the students, I have this slide up because I grew up afraid of Blacks. And this is a painting by Michael Ray Charles, who's a Black painter himself. And this is a show that that he did, a major show. And this is like a flour sack, which held his catalog, and it's called Cut and Paste. And you can see all the stereotypes that the artist is saying, hey, I'm black, and these, I know the stereotypes that go with me. Black men carry knives, we're good at sports, the hair at the time were afros. If you're a woman and you have a purse, beware. You know, all the cliches. He knows those, and I grew up with those. My family, my immediate family, was very loving. I mean, they're not mean to be racist, but they were part of systemic racism, and we all are part of systemic racism. So this is what was some of the stuff that was going on at the time. When I was teaching there, it was in the, this is a Gordon Parks photograph, famous photographer in art history. This was 1956 in Alabama, and the sign on the right is for colored to get their ice cream cones, and the white are over there. I was 11 years old at this time. Another childhood experience I had, my parents, these are ugly stories, but they're real. My parents took me and my older sister to Riverview Park in Chicago, which was an old traditional amusement park with roller coasters, you know, the old wooden kind. And they had a parachute jump, and we were just delighted. And we walked into the park, and one of the first things we saw, one of the first things I saw was 2 cages with 2 black men sitting on the cages, on a seat in the cages. Water was underneath them, and there was targets next to each of them. And you could buy tickets so that you could throw baseballs at the targets, and if you hit the target, you dump the black man in the water. And the amusement was called duck. So this was, you know, I grew up with this kind of stuff, and what was appalling about that was the situation was appalling to me, but what was even more appalling that none of us talked about it. We just, you know, looked at it and then moved on. We never discussed it. I knew it was really violent and wrong. I imagine my parents did, but we didn't talk about it. So this has to do now with me teaching at the high school. I taught basically modern art to the kids, and I was studio-based completely, but I had to teach an art history course. And we had some small version of Jansen, and it was again the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Power Movement, and I wanted the kids to, you know, become you know, to embrace African art, traditional African art. Well, no way. And I showed the books, and the pictures in the books were, you know, fertility figures, women with very pointy breasts, men with erect penises, crudely rendered, and they wanted nothing to do with that. And so I let it go. I didn't want to do more harm, so I just stopped teaching that. What I could have been teaching, had I known more, I could have been teaching the artists at the time, the Black artists at the time, to the Black students like Betty Sayre. This is the Liberation of Aunt Jemima that she made in 1972. Again, back when I was a child in Holy Trinity School, maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade, we had, for a parish fundraiser, pancake breakfast, like in the month of May or June when it was warm out. And Aunt Jemima was there flipping pancakes for a couple hours, all dressed up, and it was the Aunt Jemima. Again, it was just, it's part of the systemic racism that I grew up with. Could have been teaching about Faith Ringgold. She was making these paintings in 1967. It's called The American People. And here we have today. And I think we have to do something. I have to do something as an art teacher. And what I would do now if I were teaching high school is that I would get together with colleagues of color and figure out what to do better, how to be more inclusive, and figure out a new curriculum. And I think we really need it. And I know there are some educators out there now who are trying to do that very thing. but at the time we didn't have it. I had friendly relationships with my Black students. They were friendly, but when I walked from my art room down to the cafeteria in the basement, I'd be called a white motherfucker about 5 or 6 times every time. And I didn't really know how to talk to my Black colleagues, who I liked a lot, and they liked me, but again, we didn't talk about stuff that we should have talked about. So one day I came back from a coffee break in the faculty lounge up to my art room, and in the sink are all my grades and records floating in water, in dirty water, and on the wall is scrawled a Black Phantom. So I kind of laughed that off to myself. I thought, yeah, sorry, that's pretty good, whoever you are, good joke. But I was afraid to tell the administration that I had no more records, because I thought somehow it was my fault. I should have had them locked up or something. I don't know what I should have done, but I thought that, oh, this is my fault, I'll get in trouble. So I didn't tell anyone, and I just faked my records for the rest of that year. That happened like in April or May. The year was almost over. So those were some of the experiences. And I think I want to be active in being anti-racist, not just not racist. I'm systemically racist, but I want to stop it. And this is a quote from Toni Morrison: "In this country, American means white, everyone else has to hyphenate." These are current quotes since the recent protests. "If you are white in America, you have benefited from the color of your skin." The National Museum of African American History and Culture. And this is Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative. He says, "We need you, white people, to acknowledge your privilege and to use it to promote good and to fight oppression." And then this last quote, this is Leslie Mack, another Black leader. "What they, white people, can do is choose to admit that they benefit from racism and acknowledge that they have the power to change the conditions. And that's crucial, because this isn't a blame game." So if I were teaching today, I'd want to teach contemporary Black art. This is Glenn Ligon. This is Martin Poirier, another Black sculptor. This is one of my favorite pieces ever. It's a ladder for Booker T. Washington, the historical Black figure, and the ladder is suspended in air, and it's not on the ground, and it doesn't reach the top. And as you get to the very top, you can't get there because it goes from like about 2.5 feet at the base. This is like 2 stories, 2.5 feet at the base to about 2 inches at the top. So that's a wonderful artwork, and I used it when I taught at University of North Texas, because this piece is in the Fort Worth Modern, so we took trips there, and I could talk about that with kids, and luckily, fortunately, the class was mixed racially. I would be teaching this work by, not this work, but these works by Kerry James Marshall, the painter. I love his work. Before COVID this year here, I worked with Kerry James Marshall paintings with middle school kids at the local Montessori school, and we had wonderful discussions. And so I know it can be done. I just didn't know enough at the time to do it because I was never educated to use Black art. At North Texas, Carol Walker also had a major show, and she called it "My Compliment, My Enemy, My Oppressor, My Love." And this is an installation view at the Fort Worth Modern. So my grad students went there and they wrote about it. They came back and we talked about it. And it was very powerful. I'm showing Carol Walker because if I were back at Sumner High School, a white teacher in a black high school. I don't know if I would teach Carol Walker. I don't know. I think it would just be very difficult because her work is sexual, it's ironic, it's sarcastic, it's very graphic, and it'd just be hard. So I think you have to choose. I have to choose what work I'm going to show to whom and why and how and for what reason. And those questions I don't have answers for except through trial and error. And again, if I could be more collegial and more community-based, I could get together with other teachers and we could figure out some of this stuff. So, Ohio State University, I left the high school work and I took a faculty position at Ohio State University with a bachelor's degree. This is a 10-year track position. That would never happen these days, but it did then because I knew about photography. Photography was a new and upcoming medium, and we didn't know too much about it in art education. And I was there to teach new uses of newer media for art teachers. So I said yes, but I was in way over my head. I didn't know anything about art education. And I actually didn't even like art education. I have the typical, I'm an artist and whatever those art educators do, I don't want to be part of that. And I didn't have any respect for art teaching at the time. I wanted to avoid it. I wanted to be an artist and teach my students, my college students, to make art photographically. All my life I've made art. This is a recent painting. And this is a recent painting. And this is a recent photograph. And another one. And another one. And I got heavily involved in teaching with critiques because we would show the student work, we put it up on the wall, black and white photographs that they made in the darkroom. And we would have a discussion. Well, the discussions were really lame because I was really lame about, I don't know how to do this. And it was even more difficult, I think, because they were photographs. If they had been paintings, I think it would have been less challenging. But with photographs, you put up a picture of a waterfall and you say, well, let's talk about this. And they say, well, there's a waterfall. And it sort of ends there. So I was troubled by that. And I was, at the same time I was teaching college, at university, on my own time, I hustled to get a master's degree in art education. I learned, about Manuel Barkin, Vincent Lanier, Edmund Feldman, Elliot Eisner, Laura Chapman, Jim King McPhee. I mean, those are my base when I was a master's teacher, or master's student teaching at Ohio State. So for my master's thesis, I was studying if other photography teachers around the country, like, big name artists who taught photography, if they were having trouble getting people to talk about art, and sure enough, they were. So it wasn't just my problem, it was broader than that. So I did a master's thesis on photography criticism, and Arthur Eftland, who was my advisor for my master's, he suggested I read Morris Weitz, who was at the university at that time. And Weitz had just written the book, a book on literary criticism. And what he did methodologically was Weitz read all the criticism of Shakespeare's Hamlet, if you can imagine. And he asked, what do critics do? And he found out they did one or more of four things they described, and they interpreted, and they judged, and they theorized about what was literature. So those were like the categories that I held on to. And then I used those to expand critiques. This book I'm flashing up there is recent. It just came out, but that was a lifelong or career-long pursuit because I began doing critiques as a first-year college teacher, and I've done them ever since in all kinds of fashions. And I think they can be done better. I don't think they're very good, as they usually are. And the book tries to answer that. And the book is written directly for students, so we can sort of, I'm trying to empower the students to take more control of the critique themselves and to take it seriously and to not be so dependent on what the instructor has to say. Because of whites, I believe we don't have to judge everything we see. I think it'd be much better if we describe and interpret what we see, and if we let the artist listen to what we see and what it means to us, and let the artist decide whether she or he wants to change the work, rather than us giving advice to the artist. And this is like a typical, I think, current critique situation. You got the professor in the white hair on the right, and you got the student, and she is probably defending her work, and the students are probably telling her how to make it better, and she's trying to listen, but she can't because she's too nervous, and she won't remember any of it afterwards except did she do well or not. And I'm suggesting that we leave the artist out of it and let her just listen to what the rest of us see in her work, and then let her decide what to do about it. So that's one major recommendation. The other one is that we can use critiques now, this day when our country is so troubled. We can use critiques to learn how to talk to one another in communal fashion without calling names, without getting nasty, without getting really judgmental and trying to change someone's mind. We can use critiques to practice just being good citizens in the world. So, moving on. The first book I wrote was Criticizing Photographs. It was in 1990. I got tenure with the master's degree because I was making and exhibiting photographs, and I was writing some articles on photography education. So I tried this book, and the book was really based on my dissertation, but it's not like this is a dissertation. I really had to transform it. And that book I wrote for my students, and I invented a course on photography criticism, and I taught it to my students, and I used the manuscript as I went along with the students. It was very student-based. All my writing has to do with students, and if that's important to me. So the book went through all kinds of changes. This Mayfield was a small publisher, and it was bought up by McGraw-Hill, which is a monster publisher. McGraw-Hill put it into like a 4th edition, and then let it run out of print without telling me. And then I had about a year and a half to try to get permission from them for ownership of my manuscript. Finally, I got that, and now it's coming out next month. And Routledge is putting it out, and Routledge is really a good publisher, so I'm very happy about that. Because criticizing photographs, it gave me confidence to do more, and I wanted to reach more people. So I thought, oh, let's expand it to art. We used to call it real art at the time. And what I did was I asked colleagues in the art department and friends, and I asked about 50 people, who are the important critics today? Who are the important artists today? And I gathered, it was an informal survey, and I gathered, all their answers. A lot of the people were new to me. A lot of the artists were new to me. A lot of the critics were new to me. Some weren't, some were. And I said, okay, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to grapple with it. So I saw a student in the hallway at Ohio State who was reading a contemporary art history book. And I stopped and said, hey, you want to make some money in the library? And she said, tell me. And I said, well, I need someone to go and find articles these critics and these artists and to bring them back to me. You don't do anything except Xerox them and bring them back to me. So she said, yeah, and I paid her, and she was an undergraduate, and she did it. She did a great job. So then I had stacks, I mean, literally, it's a big stack of Xeroxes from everywhere, from Art Forum to Newsweek magazine. And I went through them and did the same thing that whites did. What do art critics do when they criticize art? And they describe, and they interpret, and they judge, and they theorize. So that's how the book is structured. And the motivation for this book, this was sort of a nervy book for me to write. So was the first one, Criticizing Photographs, because I wasn't really a recognized photographer. I wasn't really a recognized critic. And I was an art educator writing for probably students in art classes. This is not meant to be an art education book, although I used it with my art education students, and I tested it out on them. I was very aware that artists often do not have much respect for art educators. I thought, I'm doing it anyway. So I did it, and it was successful. And the idea behind doing art for art criticism, for art education, that's not my idea. That came from Barrett and the people back then who said, we don't need to be tied to the studio artist for our ideas. We can look at aestheticians, we can look at art historians, we can look at critics, we can look at theorists, we can look at feminists, we can look at post-colonialists. We can really look around and become more informed. So that's the basis of the book. Okay, so I'm teaching, and I think by this, I already had tenure, and then I got tenure, and then I got the doctorate, and then I'm teaching away and having a good time, enjoying it. I really love teaching. And I taught because of Vietnam, and I've been teaching ever since, and that was like a happy accident. I really love teaching. So while I was teaching, a former student who worked at the Ohio Arts Council said, why don't you try being an art critic in education? Sort of like an artist in the schools, but you'll be an art critic in the schools. So I thought, yeah, why not? Try that one. So I did, and I did it, tentatively. I said, yeah, I'll try it. I'll do a couple schools and see what happens. Well, I did it till 2009 when I left. Or I didn't leave, that's when I stopped doing it. And it really transformed my life and my theories and my teaching. And here's a wonderful experience I had. I was invited to a preschool, public preschool, and because they wanted to know if I would talk with their kids, about art. And I said, sure. And I said, let's use their stuffed animals. So all the little preschoolers, they weren't even kindergartners, they were preschoolers. The only requirement by the school was that they had to be diaper trained. So we sat on a carpet in a circle, and they each held their animals, and we just talked about them. I did not talk about them. I asked some questions. They did the talking. And they first, told us about their animal, and then we had all kinds of different animals. And then they wondered, or I asked them, well, how does a grizzly bear, which can eat you, how does that cuddle you all of a sudden? How did that happen? And they thought about that, and then they started working with the visual textile qualities of the objects. And they went for a good 20 minutes, squiggling the whole time, but loved it. And they listened to one another. I was fascinated. They could have gone on longer. The teacher thought 20 minutes would do it. So that was a wonderful early experience. And then this is another favorite artwork I like to use, especially with young kids. It's called Lobster and Cat by Picasso. And I would ask two questions for the whole 45 minutes. First grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and up. But my question is, what's happening here? And they'd say, a fight. And I say, how do you know it's a fight? And they tell me. And then I say, well, who's going to win? And we talked about whether the lobster or the cat would win, and they concluded that the lobster would win. And they had all these formal reasons for why that was going to happen without me ever going into elements and principles of design. We started with subject matter and said, what's happening, what's being expressed, how did he paint it, did he paint it fast or slow? Is it really clean or messy? And they said, oh, it's messy. And I said, oh, is it good messy or bad messy? Or good messy? So that's how we proceeded. And I've been doing that ever since. I like to use Larry Bregman. He's a very serious artist. Most people see him as a conceptual artist, but he does delightful stuff that anyone can relate to. This one's Dressed for Ball. The fourth and fifth graders right away got the double entendre of dressed for the orange tennis ball at the top and dressed for the ball in the formal attire. And then they talked about the differences between that. And they got into social meanings about societal pressures on girls to look a certain way to go to a ball. So much so that they didn't even have fun going to the ball because they were so self-conscious about how they looked. So they were talking about their older sisters who had been in high school, you know, proms or whatever. Revenge of the Goldfish, the Geraldines, Barbara Kruger. What do you see here? What's it about? What does mania mean? How is that a science? What's in the picture? How do these go together? And some thought it was a volcano, and then they couldn't figure out how that had to be mania. And then some kids in the room said, no, that's a mushroom cloud from the town of Brown. They did all the work. I never go in and say, hey, this is Barbara Kruger, and she's really a feminist, and she's sort of anti-war, and she's sort of anti, and I don't do all that. I just say, there's an image. It's by an artist, she's about my age, and let's work with it. And we do. And that's true whether I'm teaching college or fifth graders. We did advertising, deconstructing advertising on television and print ads. We looked at Sally Mann, immediate family, when that was controversial. A teacher in a public school, most of these are public school. I work with her fifth graders, and I cut the book apart, and they all looked at the photographs, and then they went home over the weekend and they had a writing assignment. And the writing assignment was, what do Sally Mann's photographs tell us about children? And then they came back with these one-page essays, which were really wonderful. The work, if you don't know, was controversial at the time because some of the photographs showed children in various stages of dress or undress. But the kids didn't have any problem with that. The fifth graders didn't, the parents did, some of the parents did, but the fifth graders did not. I dealt with, throughout my career, with controversial art when it was controversial. I didn't go in looking for controversy, but Maplethorpe at the time was shut down in Cincinnati. I was in Columbus, Ohio. I was invited to a high school to talk about Maplethorpe's work. They always say, come and talk to us. I do, but I never talk to them. I talk with them, and I get them to do more talking than I do. If I do more talking, it's not going well in my mind, even though I'm talking to you. I'm not as comfortable doing this as just sitting. I wish we were together, and I wish we could actually talk about images and that you could talk also. But anyway, if you want to deal with controversial images, you have to decide who, when, where, why, what's the community, what are the community standards, are you going to lose your job or not? And back in '85, when The Perfect Moment came out, or a little later, it was difficult times for teachers. A lot of people wanted to censor it. the sheriff shut it down. Anyway, what I would do is we'd look at the work, uncensored, and then I'd have them write on index cards their gut responses to the work. And I tell them, this is anonymous. Just write what you think. If you love it, hate it, think it's corrupt, whatever you think, just write what you think. And don't even worry about spelling or grammar, just get it out there on those cards. So they would, they did. And then I would collect the cards, and then I'd shuffle them and read them back anonymously. Well, some were appalled and some weren't, and some were defending it. But it really opened up the discussion, because now they knew, okay, I'm not alone here. Other people are freaked out by this, or I'm not alone here. Other people like this and think it's good art. So again, it was a way to build community and to talk about difficult topics without shouting, without name calling, without censoring. Right? We need that in society. This is a project about 10 years ago. I had a 2-year residency in Amsterdam, Holland. The project we called No Landscapes, and the faculty and I, 3 of the faculty, some artists, some art educators, wanted to do a project for art education. And we picked 3 contemporary artists, and we wanted to see what we could learn, teach with 3 contemporary Dutch artists. So we picked 3 of them. This one is computer-based. This one is a painter. It's a painting, and there's a painting in the gallery. These are the college, the Dutch college students. And I'm asking them questions like, what do you see? What do you notice? And they're answering them. It was a wonderful discussion, went on for about an hour. Could have gone longer. They never got bored. By the way, none of these artists in the schools, they never had discipline problems. They like talking about art, and they like being heard, and it's just a wonderful experience. So I asked, well, what do you see? Well, this is a list of what the group saw. And then I said, well, now that you've seen all that stuff, what do you feel? So when I see the painting, I feel curious, I feel peaceful. These are all individual. I feel peaceful, I feel cold, I get disoriented, puzzled, because I see 3 horizons. I see the green. When I see the green in the left corner, I feel nauseous. Well, that's pretty significant, because this painting, we're pretty sure, refers to war, the Second World War, and it could very well be poisonous gas there. So, and again, none of us have the right answers. This work hadn't been written about before. The painter just had painted it. So this is the one that was my favorite to work with. This is a video. It's called The Carpet Told Me. It's a loop. You'd see it in a museum, in a room, on the wall in a dark room, and it looked like a still picture. But then you notice that things are moving a little bit, very subtly. So we looked at that, and then I said, one of my prompts was to any group. We work with citizens in Amsterdam, we work with school kids, we work with college kids, work with artists. The prompt was, what did the carpet tell you? Or what does the carpet tell you? And this is age 10. The carpet told me, be quiet, listen to the wind, the animals, nature. Look at the clouds, the reeds, the sun, feel the warmth, forget bad things, don't think, lay down, keep still, have hope. That's a 10-year-old. And in the video, there are subtle sounds of birds, and you can hear the wind a little bit, very subtle. Someone told Karen, the carpet told Karen, age 48, sit down and look and listen, look in the mirror. I see, I hear, I feel. What do I know? A surface floating on a surface, in between. Then we took, these are teenagers with autism. It's a school for autistic teens. And in the background are some of their teachers. And sitting on the floor are the college students that I'm teaching, and we did the carpet with them. And we had wonderful discussions. This is the most poignant thing I've seen on the carpet. One of the kids with autism said, "I feel like I am the carpet in my family." Another kid said, "I have a Black Latin American father, and I always thought I was a Native person. But a week ago, when I had a social studies class, I read a sentence that people with one parent whose origin is Latin American were foreigners." So I was in shock because I always felt Dutch. Then another project, I had the art education students take the piece out into the community, take it home to your family or neighbors or whatever. So this is Anne. She was like a junior art major. She showed the video to my parents and my little sister. I asked them what they saw in the picture. Lisa, my little sister, said, "Freedom because the carpet is floating on the water." My father said, "A flying carpet because the carpet is not connected to the water." My mother saw it as a fairy tale because the scene is so unnatural. I like it as a fantasy because I have never seen such a perfect landscape. Well, it was a wonderful experience for Anne and her family. Her family got to see what she could do as an art teacher. They were very interested in the contemporary work of art, which is kind of bizarre by, probably by their standards of what art is in Holland. We called the whole project "No Landscapes," kind of, humorously. And she wanted to go out, Anne wanted to go out and do more, and I wanted to keep teaching, because I always wondered, could my students do what I could do in the classroom? And she showed that they could. She took it home and she got a wonderful discussion. Another project, this was in Cortona, Italy. University of Georgia had a semester there. I'm aware of time. I'm gonna keep going until someone stops me. And if you choose to leave, feel free. I know we're over time. So these are American students from University of Georgia, but other places also. And we're in Italy, and it's in our education class, and our assignment is to teach kids in the local elementary school. We didn't have Italian. This one of the girls, women, had Italian, but the rest of us did not. So we decided that we'd work with angels, because angels are so prominent in Italian society and Italian culture. And we took the kids, these are little third and fourth graders, we took them to the local museum in their town, and we looked at all the kinds of paintings, most of which had angels in them. That's how common angels are there. It also happened that they had in Cortona, in their town, and they had a Fra Angelico altarpiece, the Annunciation. So we definitely want to take advantage of that one. So with the little kids, we talked about angels. So we have lesson plans and all that. And we translated the lesson plans through Google sometimes, and through our one Italian who could, so to speak, and one of the faculty members at the college. We showed them a lot of angels on postcards. We passed out postcards, and each one of them had a postcard angel. And we asked them, what does your angel look like? What is your angel doing? What powers does your angel have? What feelings does your angel show? What's in the background? And then we said, okay, and make your own angel. An angel is going to visit you tonight. What's it like? What does it look like? It can be anything you want it to be. Just go for it. So they did. And they really got into it. And so we had, maybe 100 drawings of angels they had made, and then we sorted through them. Then with the older kids, the 4th and 5th graders, we had a different prompt, and the prompt was, well, here's some of the angels that the little kids did. And then for the older kids, the 4th and 5th graders, we said, imagine that you are Angel Gabriel. What is your message for today? What's your message for yourself, a parent, a friend, a politician? What would the angel tell you personally today? So here's, this one cracks me up. The little chicken is the Holy Ghost, you know, the dove. They all crack me up. I think they're wonderful. So this 4th or 5th grader said, I am your angel, come to you because I want to say that you have to be more courageous and you have to face all your fears because I know you can do it. And the angel went away and left me courage. And then there's another story about the angel and another 5th grader, the angel. You like nature, right? Why? It's good because people are decreasing the animal population. The child says, you're right, we've got to stop that. The angel says, we will. Come on, hop on my back and we'll spread the news. Before we could say scrambled eggs on the sidewalk, we were in the Amazon. How do we get there so fast? Angel says, I can teleport. So we chatted with the woodsman and they agreed to stop cutting trees. And then this is one of the artists in residence at the college, Ann Coble, who's a wonderful bookmaker. She, professional museum quality work. She took all those drawings and she bound them into a book, a one-of-a-kind book. This is a book being opened. Those are tipped. Those are the original drawings tipped in. We used every drawing that we had from the kids, tipped them in, and then presented that to the school and the town as, a culmination. By the way, we had to talk to the mayor before we did this, as part of the protocol, tell them what we're doing and what we're teaching, as well as the teachers, of course. And then we had an opening with all the students, all the college students showed their work, and the art educators showed the angels' work. And in the background, we have slides of what was going on and every angel. And then here they're looking at handouts and lesson plans. And this is a parent with their kids because they brought the angels home. So the community was involved, the parents were involved, and it was a community celebration. Okay, different story. Back in 2004, I accepted, this is during the Iraq War, I accepted an invitation to go to Tehran, Iran, to work with the 9th annual Iranian photography biennial. So there I am in Tehran, working with photographers, professional or amateur, adult photographers, not total students. And they had bootlegged my book, which is on the bottom. So they had access to the book, Criticizing Photographs. So we're doing group discussion. Again, it's not me telling them how to make their photographs better. It's us talking about photographs and what they mean and how they mean, listening to one another. It's very well attended. They're very serious. They were nervous about one of their primary questions was, are we as good as them in New York? Could they match in Iran? Could they match the rest of the world professionally? That was their insecurity, and they wanted some kind of reassurance about that. So we talked about that. And they didn't respect their own work enough. And they were basically telling each other their work wasn't very good. Well, I redirected and, we talked about, well, what do we got here? We got some good stuff here. What is it? Then I was invited to give a public lecture in Tehran. That's me. The translator is there. Here's a wonderful translator. He said, just speak a paragraph. I'll take it from there. So we did. I chose slides. Get a chance to figure out where I'm missing X, and he'd translate. It was really wonderful. Except that, where am I? Oh, way, it's hard to see in the slide, way in the middle, foreground, background. And with my translator, someone took the photograph from up here, and above my head is the Ayatollah Khomeini. Now, the Ayatollah Khomeini is the one who condemned Salman Rushdie to death for having written the satanic verses, which the Ayatollah thought was blasphemous. So he had a fatwa out on this Rushdie. Well, in my book, Interpreting Art, I use the Ayatollah as a bad example of criticism. And I'm thinking, oh boy. But it went all right. It went well. Eventually, after many years at Ohio State, which I loved, I had enough in for retirement, and I wasn't ready to retire. I took the opportunity to go to the University of North Texas, where I taught there for 5 years. That's just me in the office. And after I retired, when Susan and I moved to Florida, I got another invitation to work back in Amsterdam on a huge project called The Grid. This is a painting in the background. It's in an old shipping warehouse in Amsterdam. And it's got something like 64 paintings. They're each about 8 foot square. That's the artist. And he wanted me to lead discussions about his work because he knew that's what I did. So he invited me and paid my way to do it. And so then I would just work like 3 or 4 times a day, or announce times when you could interact with the work if you wanted. So people would show up and I'd get them talking about it. And they really got into it. They loved it. This is me gesturing, but I'm not explaining what's going on in the painting. I'm pointing to, is this the one you're talking about? And is this what you mean? I'm trying to clarify them, and so that we're all on the same page or same painting. And it was fun. I mean, they loved it, I loved it. And we're in the community, that's what's important. This is very contemporary art. Some of it was probably still wet. We were engaging with it. So that was a wonderful experience. So this is back in Florida. That's Susan, my wife. This is in front of a Martin Poirier sculpture. These are my older granddaughters with Susan, looking hip with our sunglasses. These are the younger ones in the same family. And these are my other 2 who live in Florida, our other 2 who live in Florida. So, thank you.